Relocation used to be a constant in professional football back when it was still in its infancy. Although the NFL as we know it today, post-AFL merger, is only 50-some-odd years old, it has come a long, long way since the proverbial Stone Age, when team owners were moving franchises left and right to try and find the most appetizing markets to set their roots in. It is a tricky situation to navigate too, because as much as today's owners want to keep their eyes peeled for the most profitable situations, if they tip their hand when it comes to relocation, it can sow discontent amongst its current fan base. So it is a very delicate balance when it comes to sifting through these opportunities, one that requires a level of subtlety that is incredibly hard to achieve, considering the magnitude of discovery that goes into evaluating a potential landing space. We saw all of this in the flesh during the early 2010s, when relocation rumors started to swirl around a handful of franchises that seemed primed for the opportunity. The rumors were particularly potent because while the NFL was obviously still making money hand over fist, there was a glaring omission from its portfolio of major television markets. The Los Angeles market, which hadn't had its own NFL team since '95, when the Rams and Los Angeles Raiders both picked up and moved to St. Louis and Oakland respectively. In the time since both teams moved again, the Rams returned to LA to a state-of-the-art facility in Inglewood. The Raiders, on the other hand, are scheduled to play their first games in their new home in 2020 in Sin City, making them the first NFL team to call Vegas its home. Both of these recent moves took place during a 5-year stretch in which the San Diego Chargers also moved to Los Angeles, making it 3 teams in 5 years to change their home after no movement since '97. While it may seem strange that all of these teams made the move in such a small window of time, there is actually a reason for that. The relocation of an NFL franchise typically coincides with the expiration of its stadium leases, so historically we have seen teams move in waves. Between '95 and '97, there were actually 2 other moves, besides the Rams and Raiders. The Cleveland Browns famously moved to Baltimore to become the Ravens in one of the most controversial relocations in major professional sports history. In fact, the revolt was so significant that it took the NFL just 3 years to award a new franchise to Cleveland. And in '97, the Houston Oilers moved to Memphis and became the Tennessee Oilers, before moving to Nashville in '98, citing poor attendance as the catalyst, where they would officially be renamed the Titans as we know them today. And this wasn't the first time there was a mass exodus in the NFL. In the '80s, there were 3 teams that moved. The Raiders left Oakland for the first time to make Los Angeles their home after a nasty court case with the NFL. The St. Louis Cardinals moved to the greater Phoenix area, originally playing its games in Tempe as the Phoenix Cardinals before moving to a different Phoenix suburb, Glendale, where they currently reside under the name Arizona Cardinals. And of course, the Baltimore Colts slipped out of Maryland in the middle of the night to move to Indianapolis. Just like in the early '60s when the then Chicago Cardinals moved to St. Louis, the Chargers moved from Los Angeles to San Diego, and the Dallas Texans of the AFL moved to Kansas City to become the Chiefs. The point is, these flurries of relocations generally happen in spurts, and since 3 teams have already moved in 5 years, and there are no other stadium leases set to expire in the immediate future, it is very unlikely that we see another team make a move in the short term. But let's take a look at some of the candidates to relocate once their stadium leases expire, and who is the most likely to find a new home. There are 3 names that repeatedly get brought up these days when it comes to relocation talks: the Buffalo Bills, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's start with the team that I think is the least likely to go anywhere, the Buffalo Bills. The fate of the Buffalo Bills was much more in flux a few years back, when they were up for sale following the death of longtime owner Ralph Wilson. It was important to then controlling owner Mary Wilson to respect her Uncle Ralph's long-standing desire to keep the Bills in Buffalo, where they had been since he started the franchise in the upstart AFL back in 1959. Terry Pegula, the American billionaire who made his money in natural gas development, was a suitor who won out, purchasing the Bills in 2014 for $1.4 billion. While many fan bases would be terrified of a billionaire coming in and buying their team for fear that he would want to relocate to a greener, more profitable pasture, Mary went through a careful vetting process to ensure that whoever purchased the Bills intended to keep the team in Buffalo. Considering that Pegula purchased the Buffalo Sabres, Buffalo NHL franchise, and the Buffalo Bandits, their National Lacrosse League counterpart back in 2011, he is already heavily invested in the area. And for any Buffalo sports fans worried that he might uproot all of their teams at this point, it seems incredibly unlikely. In 2012, he also won a bid for the development rights to the Webster Block on Buffalo's waterfront, where he built a $170 million hockey-themed building loaded with everything from retail to restaurants to hotels. And that's just his larger business ventures. Pegula has a vast portfolio of other enterprises all centered on the Buffalo market, so it is pretty safe to say that the Bills aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
Going nowhere. We ain't going nowhere.
The Jacksonville Jaguars are the other team that always seems to get mentioned when it comes to relocation talks, which made sense when they were one of the poorest drawing teams in the entire NFL. Back in 2009, when they were really struggling, 7 of their 8 home games were blacked out on local TV because they hadn't sold enough tickets. It got so bad that they were covering the upper deck seats with tarps to ease the visual of the empty stadium. This is what made the Jaguars the poster child for the NFL London experiment, which has been going on for a little over 10 years now. It is no secret that Commissioner Roger Goodell and the rest of the NFL ownership find the notion of entering the largely untapped European and UK markets tantalizing. It has been discussed ad nauseum since the league's first European expansion, NFL Europa, officially folded back in 2007. And since the Jaguars were struggling so mightily to draw fans, it seemed logical to use them as one of the primary test studies for the market. So if they did end up deciding to move a team, instead of creating an expansion franchise, they would have already built up some sort of following. As a result, the Jaguars have played a game in England every year since 2013, and in 2020 they will become the first team to play consecutive games in England. But in the time since these arrangements were made, the Jaguars have really started to right the ship domestically. Those tarps that once hid the shame of its pitiful home drawings are now a thing of the past. And Jaguars have risen to the middle of the pack in terms of attendance numbers. Much of the credit for the Jaguars' recent turnaround can be attributed to the team's new owner, Shad Khan, who purchased the team back in 2011. Khan, who had been eager to own an NFL team for years and had recently been ousted on his attempt at purchasing the then St. Louis Rams by one of the team's minority owners, Stan Kroenke, jumped at the opportunity to buy the Jaguars when the word got out that Wayne Weaver and his ownership group were looking to sell the team. Although he has honored the deal that has the Jaguars continuing to play games in London, it is in all likelihood just to continue to build the franchise's brand internationally rather than with any intent to move them to England. Khan has invested heavily in the North Florida area since purchasing the team, putting millions into renovations at TIAA Bank Field, as well as investing in a variety of real estate properties that surround the stadium. The stadium does still need some more upgrades, as it, along with New Era Field in Buffalo, are the only NFL stadiums still in use that haven't undergone at least $300 million worth of renovations since 1995 that isn't necessarily a negative for football fans in Jacksonville. Their lease with the city of Jacksonville expires in 2029, and the looming threat of London will surely be used as leverage with the city to put down some serious coin to re-up the Jaguars' digs in Jacksonville if they want to keep the team in the area. As far as the rumors that have continued to circle around the team, Shad Khan was sure to nip them in the bud, telling Rich Eisen,
"We don't want to have more games than there's really organic demand for."
There's no plans for you to just move your team to London?
Well, I think no. There are no plans for us to move the team to London.
Of course, it is always possible that he changes his mind, but it seems highly unlikely that he uproots the Jaguars from an area where he has already invested so much money. Now, the Jaguars and state neighbors, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, are a different story. And if you ask me, they are the most likely to get moved when their lease expires in 2028. The Buccaneers have been in existence much longer than the Jags, who were founded in '95. But their 43 seasons in the NFL have been rather unfruitful, at least when it comes to the product they put out on the field, as the Bucs have the single worst win-loss percentage in all 4 major American sports leagues. Although their performance has left much to be desired, the team does have a pretty steady following in the area, and the ownership group did just recently dump over $150 million into renovating the antiquated Raymond James Stadium. Not only did they bolster up their game day home, but they also constructed a $20 million practice bubble. And in 2017, following the Rams and Chargers relocations, the Bucs were one of the 29 other teams to receive a $55.2 million gross payment from the moving franchise's relocation fees. The one stipulation: they need to remain in Tampa Bay for the subsequent 11 years. Still, that doesn't mean that once 2028 rolls around and they are free to move, now the opportunity to do so won't be enticing. There is one rather looming trepidation for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans. who desperately want to see the team remain in Florida. The Glazer family, which purchased the team back in 1995 and is largely responsible for the general upswing that the franchise has seen in the past 25 years, has another rather impressive asset in his professional sports business portfolio. Between 2003 and 2005, Malcolm Glazer, who has since passed on and handed down his estate to his 6 children, began to procedurally buy out the other American minority owners in the premier football club that he too was a minority owner in, Manchester United. After building up enough equity, he completed the takeover, and the Glazer family now owns 90% of England's most prestigious professional sporting club. Suddenly, the idea of moving the Buccaneers to London makes all too much sense, because in addition to owning and operating the financial beast that is Man U, the Glazer family could take its knowledge of the England markets and be the first ownership group to bring an NFL franchise across the pond. While there is no guarantee that during the next 10 to 20 years we see an NFL team move to London, or anywhere else for that matter, one thing is for certain. Professional football is a business. If the money is right, don't be surprised to see a team up and move. And considering the family's other business interests and the lukewarm reception that they have received from the local government in Tampa, there is definitely no ruling out the Buccaneers being the next team to relocate. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do that by hitting the subscribe button down below. If you liked the video, then like the video. We'd really appreciate it. And last but not least, don't forget to tune in to TPS for more cool videos every single day. We'll see you next time.